Welcome, everybody, to the Art of a Peaceful Mind. My name is Kim Root. I'm your host, and today we have with us Dr. Amy Johnson, who's a psychologist, a coach, an author, and a speaker. And she is the author of Being Human and the Little Book of Big Change. Is that right?
Yeah.
And let's welcome Amy. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Kim. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks.
Great. I have a question about what motivated you in the first place to become a psychologist, and then if there was a change from being a psychologist into then becoming a coach and an author. What was that progression? What motivated those changes for you?
Yeah, well, I wanted to become a psychologist when I was about 6 years old, before I could say psychologist, because I thought my parents were insane, and I thought every adult around me just had it all wrong, and I wanted to just figure it out. At that point, I was already a little anxious. Like, my parents had gotten divorced. There was so much tension and fighting, and just I was hearing things that kids shouldn't really be hearing, in my opinion. And it was just like, ugh, like, why don't they just chill out? That was how it looked as a 6-year-old. And it turns out as a almost 42-year-old, it still kind of looks that way. Not that it's always that easy, but there was that sense as a little kid, that innocence of like, I don't think life is supposed to be quite this hard, and they're running around crazy, suffering all over the place, spewing in their suffering everywhere. And I know I'm just a kid, but I think there's got to be a better way. So honestly, I grew up near Detroit, which is where Wayne Dyer was, which is where Marianne Williamson used to do things in a church here in Detroit all the time. I mean, and I was a kid. I wasn't going to those, but I knew of those people. My mom had those books laying around. And so I started reading that stuff, Zig Ziglar and just motivational stuff from like a really young age. And so I studied psychology, and kind of saw that, traditional psychology, it was fascinating to me because I was, and still I'm super interested in just how humans work and how our experience works. But traditional psychology didn't really like cut it for me. It was kind of like, I don't want to sit around and talk about schizophrenia and depression and all the problems and what's wrong with people. I want to get in and, again, just see how the average person, like, why do we go from 0 to 100 with our feelings? What's that about? And how do we feel stuff and be normal people in the world, but still have a level of freedom and childlikeness within us, So after studying psychology and social psychology in particular, because that was the closest I could get in a university to what I wanted to do, I kind of left and said, okay, that's fine, but that wasn't it. And so I went more in the direction of the spiritual work and self-help and that type of stuff. And that's, to your question, that's what kind of took me from the traditional path to more of the path that I'm on now.
Ah, okay. So was there a particular thing happening in your life later, or like at 6 years old, that's pretty young. I mean, I know, me too. My family went through a divorce. I was a little older, but my brother was 6. And so, yeah, it's not fun to watch those things. Or it's confusing, I think. So, but then you made the decision later, like, psychology wasn't quite it. There was something deeper, I guess I'm hearing you say, that you wanted to get to.
Yeah. I mean, really, it was like in graduate school, I had a ton of anxiety. I went through really, had several diagnoses, was in my own therapy and stuff for anxiety at that time. That sort of panic attacks and all of that kind of changed form into some habits, eating habits and eating issues and all kinds of stuff like that. And really what I saw, again, I mean, I was in therapy for a while, and it just never went deep enough. It had this feeling of kind of kind of just rehashing the same things over and over again. And I noticed that very often I wasn't excited to go to therapy. Like I might wake up and have kind of a decent feeling. And then if I knew I had to go sit and talk to my therapist that day, I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to go back to the problem, you know? So it didn't like it became something where, again, it was like, I don't think I want to do that. And so, when I began working with people, it was from more of a coaching, spiritual kind of understanding, spiritual, but also looking at our thoughts and kind of, you know, changing thoughts and a little CBT-ish, but, you know, Byron Katie-ish, that kind of stuff. And that too, it was far more helpful than any, in my experience, it was far more helpful than any traditional psychology. But there was still something, you know, it still felt like, but what's it all about? Sure, we can look at what someone's thinking or feeling and question the logic in that, question the truth in that, and that absolutely helps people. But why, like, do we have to do that? Do we have to do the work? Do we have to like carry worksheets around for life? Like I wasn't doing that when I was 6, you know, and I didn't need it then. So again, it still felt like, okay, I'm way closer, but there's got to be something even bigger that underpins all of this. And again, in my life, yeah, I was still struggling with my own eating issues at that point, and the tools that I was using with clients weren't really helping me. So that, again, it just does all kind of like took me even deeper into this kind of search, I guess, for who we really are and where our experience really comes from.
Right. Yeah. That's more positive, more exciting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hear you. What I hear from you is that the idea of focusing on the problem or investigating something that's wrong,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like we need to do that part, or why do it, or why be miserable in that, rather than finding something else. So I mean, you talk about in one of the videos I was watching about this internal shift. So I'm really curious about what was that internal shift? How can we either find that for ourselves, or what was it for yourself?
Yeah. Well, like what you say, you're right about kind of, you know, we don't go into the problem all the time and trying to fix a problem. It not only didn't feel good, it just started to not make sense so much because, you know, I think it has this feel of like running around through life looking, and this is how I was trained in my early days to even start a conversation with a client is, so what's wrong?
Ah,
Basically, you know, like what's bothering you this week or what's going on this week, you know, and there is that sense of drudging it up in order to look at it. And that has a certain logic. If we think that's the best we can do, of course we're going to do that, right? But what I started to see, I guess, is that in each and every moment. So really where it started for me is I heard someone say that we are all 100% mentally well and healthy, no exceptions, 100% of the time. We have this deeper innate health, and our moment to moment experience is coming to us from the thinking that comes to life in that moment. And what I heard in that was, oh, like you know, not in an instant, but over time, as I looked more at that and studied that more, I began to see that I had never had a problem, really. Like nothing had ever been wrong, and that's true for everyone else. But my mind kept thinking anxious thoughts, just to really simplify it, like thinking anxious thoughts, and I kept feeling anxious. And then I would look and say, man, I have an anxiety problem. Well, not really. I just had some anxious thoughts and feelings like everyone, right?
uh-huh.
But when they came to life, my mind innocently would kind of pounce on them and say, "Oh, there's your anxiety. See, you've been an anxious kid ever since you were young, you know." Like, so that started to look like a problem. Exact same with food stuff. We could apply it to anything, really. But for me, like exact same with food stuff. Like, so my mind would get busy and it would start to obsess about food and this and that. And okay, fine, right? But I, on top of that, came in and thought, oh, there's my eating disorder. There's this problem, you know, and I just took it so darn seriously. That's it. And I started to see that like with everyone, right? It's like, what if we're all fine? we're all full of mental health. We have this resilience that's there when our mind quiets down. When we get peaceful, we're back to us. And we have super active imaginations and minds and psychology. And when we get caught up in that and identified with that, well, it looks like there's all kinds of problems that we need to fix. But when we see that for what it is and we kind of come back home, which is beneath all of that, those problems don't look like they need to be fixed so much. It's a matter of kind of seeing them for what they are. So in a nutshell, I mean, that's sort of the big shift that I started to see. And then for myself and from people I worked with, the way I worked with people, it became so not at all really about looking at a problem and trying to solve it or even see it differently, but to see like the whole thing differently, to see ourselves more from who we really are, and then to see our psychology for what it really is. And oh my gosh, what a difference that made. Everything.
Yeah. Wow. So you, I think what I hear is about that we have this habit to identify ourselves somehow with all of those feelings or the thinking. It's almost like
Yeah.
we need to identify with some kind of issue or some kind of problem, and to see that it. So what happens when you see that that's not you or not there anymore? Seems like a whole new shift or a whole new world opens up of possibility. Or
Exactly. I mean, it's, yeah, just like what happens, like, oh my gosh, you're right. I mean, it is like a whole new world because it's sort of like, when our mind is just tossing up all this stuff and we're just instantly, innocently thinking that's us and we're just in that little world, we really, it's kind of cliche, but it is like we have these blinders on. We're just seeing the world that we expect to see from our misunderstanding, really. We're in like our own psychology and we're sort of just in that. We don't even know to see anything else or to look anywhere else. And
uh-huh.
so there's that. And again, in that world, everything's a problem. You need to fix things. Problems don't fix themselves. You need to fix them and you need to do this and that. And it's a big mess. And then, yes, what opens up is like, okay, that can all still be happening. Because I haven't figured out a way to make my brain do what I want it to do or make my thoughts go where I want them to go, really. I mean, without a ton of work, no one can do that I'm aware of. We're going to think what we think and feel what we feel. And I don't think we are doing that. It's like life's just moving through us. But with life moving through us, we like get to look over here, like the blinders are
Yeah.
off, Then it's like, oh, there goes my mind being nutty about food again. Okay, well, just going to make a sandwich and get on with my day. It's like, I mean, and that's, again, I'm saying it in kind of an extreme way, but that's kind of how it starts to open up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I remember like thinking one time that like washing the dishes, right? You're washing the dishes and you're focused on washing the dishes and the radio is going on in the background. This is kind of how I can see that. Radio is going on in the background, you're not really paying attention, but suddenly somebody says something that catches your attention. My mind moved from washing the dishes over to, oh, and then something new, and I realized, oh, my mind can move back and forth and choose where it focuses. So sounds kind of like to develop that maybe muscle, or it's not really a muscle, but the ability to move our minds.
Yeah.
We can do that onto something positive or something just what is, maybe. I don't know if you're saying positive or.
Yeah, I think just almost like what's beyond all of that.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like if you're sitting there staring at the radio and you're just in the radio, then that's what you're in. But then, right, if somebody says, that's just a radio, and you could put it over there and it could be background noise,
Right.
man, then the whole room opens up with the dishes and everything else, right? So yeah, like I think it is like just knowing that there's another place to look,
Mhm.
knowing that there's a place to listen and look and feel for, and it's all metaphor, of course, but a place to kind of sense within us that's way beyond the little stories and habitual thoughts and feelings and that's going on in our psychology.
Mm. Yeah. So, so you talk about like mm, the truth of who we are is is that something that we just discover once we go there, or is there mm, is there some truth of who
Yeah.
we are?
I mean, I don't want to go on record as saying like, here's the truth of who we are. I don't know, but but I think for each of us to just get curious about that. I mean, one thing I'm pretty darn sure of is that we aren't what we think, what we feel, what we do, the words that we've associated with ourselves. How can we be? Because we've
Right.
been here for as long as we've been here, and all of that has changed a ton. We aren't our opinions, our political stance. Like, I mean, that all of that, as much as some of that feels so much like a part of who we are, and in everyday conversation, we might kind of identify with those things. Clearly, like they're always changing. Anything in this world of experience and form, it's just, it can't be who we are. So, I guess the best we can do is to just get curious about that for ourselves
Mm.
and sense into like, where's the me that's been here since the minute I was born? Where's that bigger awareness or whatever we might call it, and just see what's in there for ourselves.
Right. So like that one that you were when you were 6 years old, watching your parents fight and being like, does it really have to be that way? Because maybe you had a sense already.
Yeah.
We do have a sense when we're
Yeah.
young. I remember looking at my parents, or my father and stepmother actually arguing, and thinking to myself, don't they know they love each other? Don't they know they're saying the same thing?
Yeah.
So,
Have
so
you seen that? There's that sculpture. I think it was created at Burning Man recently, or maybe it was a long time ago because I feel like I've seen it a lot. It's tossed around a picture like on Facebook and stuff a lot. But it's like a wire mesh adults with their backs to each other. And then inside of that, so it's like they're sitting like this, like they're angry with their backs to each other, like they're fighting. And then inside of each of these huge wire mesh angry people are these two little kids, and they're like touching, so like they're like touching hands, and it's like, yeah, like they just want like, hey, let's just connect again, but that bigger wireframe is like just this ego and psychology we get caught up in, and no, that's angry, so I'm not talking to you right now, but yeah, I mean, just like what is in there, it's so much in that for each of us to just look toward, and once we start to get a little more familiar, like have some kind of relationship with that, or a sense of it, or anything, what I think naturally happens, what I've seen naturally happen for people, is that we don't have to do a thing, but naturally all of this psychology stuff, it just kind of becomes like a second class citizen in a way. Now it's still huge and in our face, and we're still human beings, but we can't help but take it a little less seriously and see, like, it's like I see through you, like I'm on to you a little bit, so when your mind goes to some habitual place, or your behaviors go to some habitual place, you just naturally start to see, okay, well, that's just where my mind went and what I did. That's not me. And again, we can say that all day long, and that doesn't really have meaning until someone's kind of felt that for themselves. But to really feel, yeah, what is that bigger me? And it instantly starts to put your experience, your psychology, your behaviors, your habits, all of that just into it just looks different.
mm, yeah, okay. So I can see how by being in that new place where the chatter is over somewhere else,
Hmm.
the judgment and the chatter is somewhere else, that's it's a natural let go then, to let go of those the the anxieties or
Yeah,
whatever, because that's part of the thinking. uh,
exactly. And
yeah.
because our nature is so resilient and healthy, as soon as we're not staring there, like we're just back to ourselves. Well, like, right? Like little kids. It's like you
Yeah.
get mad, but then like as soon as you stop forgetting that you're mad, you're just back to being yourself and being happy, you know? So yeah, so it's amazing to just that natural let go. That's all we ever have to do because our nature so like just wants to be back at home, back in the moment. There's so much momentum in favor of that that we'll fall right back into that.
Do you do you notice that once people recognize that there's a tendency to snap back to that habit of judging and being in the fear because it's habitual through their life? Does it take
Yeah.
a little while?
Yes. It I mean often it does, I think for sure. But what's interesting is like our brain will still go there, but we've kind of had the bigger awareness of it. So for sure your brain still goes there and for sure you still get kind of caught up in that at times because, you know,
Yeah.
brain's pretty big. Um but yeah, it's also like different. So absolutely, it's not like the psychology changes overnight, but our awareness of it changes. So it does tend to be sometimes everybody's different. Sometimes it's huge instant insight, but more often than not, what I see is, yeah, it's like we're just kind of onto it, so we're less gripped, but we might still be doing it. And a lot of times, the people I work with in my school and stuff, will be like, I still binge ate yesterday, or I still felt anxious and left the store because I couldn't handle the crowd, or whatever their thing is. But it just doesn't like in the beginning, it just doesn't like freak them out or bother them in quite the same way. So they're like, yeah, that's what I did. That's what I've been doing. And then over time, it's like, yeah, I still felt anxious, but I just hung out in the store. Or, you know, I still had that desire to eat a bunch of food or whatever, but you know, I ate a little bit and then I quit. So it'll kind of sometimes be gradual like that, just which I love. I think it just feels natural. You know, it's like we're outgrowing something because we're just seeing it more clearly.
Mhm. Yeah. It's simple and fresh the way that you're talking about it. I like it.
Yeah.
Um, do you want to talk a little bit about um, your school and yeah.
Sure. So, yeah, the Little School of Big Change, that's the primary way that I kind of share this with people. And it is, there's people in there for all kinds of reasons, but a lot of people going through some anxiety or various habits. And I think all habits are kind of the same. Again, it's at the level of the psychology, it's just where our mind takes us for comfort. That's it. So whether we drink or eat or shop or cut or whatever we do, you know, for comfort in that way, we kind of look at it all the same. But it's a really awesome community, global community. People from 26 countries are in the community, and we just get together and kind of, you know, there's the curriculum I've developed that kind of shares this understanding and just support each other. And I kind of support people through their issues. And yeah, it's a really nice way to just kind of see more about this.
Mm. Yeah, that's great. It's nice we have access to that kind of community too. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and also you have a free gift for everybody, right? Who wants to choose?
Yeah. Yeah, I believe it's my PDF. It's maybe 4 or 5 page document just about kind of what I'm sort of talking about here in terms of specifically in terms of habits and anxiety and how it's so ironic the way that we try to change is like we've discussed here. The way we are just conditioned to try to change is by grabbing a problem and then doing a bunch of stuff to try to make it go away. And
Right.
this is a completely different approach of like, let's just see the problem for what it is over here and not keep looking at it. And what do you know? When you do that, it goes away. So it's like change in a totally different way.
Okay. So if we just have about a minute left. So is there anything else you'd like to share for people who would like to connect with you or people who are stuck in that judgment about themselves or the habitual issues, which there are many?
Yeah. I mean, just that, you know, our our habits and issues and what we're caught up in, they aren't personal. You know, I used to think, oh, and almost everybody I talk with, that's almost the heaviest part of it. It's like, what's wrong with me? Like, what kind of person am I that I do this or have this issue? Or, we put it on ourselves so much, but we don't think our own thoughts on purpose. Like I wasn't sitting around thinking anxious thoughts. Like no one is. No one's sitting around on purpose
Mm.
trying to think up habitual stuff. It's more just that that's what's showing up for us. And when we kind of see, okay, that's not mine. I don't have to identify with that. Like you mentioned, Kim, like it's incredible what opens up. That's it. So there's so much hope, so much hope. And your stuff is not yours. It doesn't say a thing about you. If you can just take that with you, I think that goes such a long way of just lightening the shame and the load around all of this, and just know there's so much hope because it truly is about just looking in a slightly different direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to let go of having to see yourself as dot, 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 something.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Thank you so much. And for everybody in the audience who wants to get a hold of Amy, the email or the website is www.dramyjohnson.com. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim. It was great talking with you.
Bye, Amy.
Bye.